Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really vital, how physical activity and sports shape our health, our well-being.
Definitely. And for you, the learner, we've pulled together some fascinating insights. We're looking at everything from team psychology
Right.
to broad health benefits from big reviews, and even a specific look at swimming.
Our mission here is really to boil it all down for you. Get the key takeaways on how sports and activity impact you at different life stages.
Yeah, separating the solid facts from maybe the potential downsides and giving you practical stuff you can actually use. No jargon overload.
Exactly. We've got some great sources. The International Journal of Sports Psychology on teams, a big review from PubMed Central on general health benefits using Sweden as a bit of a case study.
And that thesis on swimming and well-being, so a good mix.
A really comprehensive look. Okay, let's get started.
All right, so team sports first.
Yeah, let's do it. That International Journal of Sports Psychology study. What's the main finding?
Okay, so the big thing is team cohesion, basically how tightly knit a team is.
Right.
They found that stronger cohesion is linked to lower stress and better resilience when athletes are under pressure.
Resilience. Okay, so it's more than just liking each other.
Oh, much more. It creates this sense of psychological safety. That's the term they use.
Psychological safety. Tell me more about that.
Well, it means you feel safe to take risks, maybe try something new or innovative.
Because you know the team has your back.
Exactly. You feel supported, even if it doesn't pan out perfectly. It encourages pushing boundaries a bit.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there data on how much difference this makes?
Yeah, actually. Albert Karen, a sports psychologist, his work showed that collective motivation, the team's drive, can jump by as much as 30% in really cohesive teams.
Wow, 30%.
Yeah.
Just from that team bond.
Yep. It's a pretty staggering figure. It shows that building that spirit isn't just, a nice to have. It directly impacts motivation.
So it's a performance enhancer, basically.
That's
What about bringing new people into a team like that? Does the source mention that?
It does. It highlights how crucial it is to integrate new players effectively, especially for long-term stability and success in high-level competition.
So it's not just about the new person's skill, but how they fit into that cohesive unit.
Precisely. You need to maintain that shared identity and feeling of safety even as the team changes. It takes conscious effort.
This really makes you think, the learner. How could these ideas apply outside of sports?
That's a great question.
Like in your job or group projects?
Yeah.
Could building that same kind of psychological safety and support boost resilience and drive there too?
Something definitely worth pondering. Okay, shall we broaden the scope now? Look at the general health benefits.
Yeah, let's shift to that PubMed Central review. It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. It starts by saying sports are good mainly because of the physical activity, obviously.
But there's more to it.
Yes, secondary benefits like psychosocial development, personal growth, and interestingly, maybe even less alcohol consumption among participants.
Okay, mostly positive then. But you mentioned potential downsides earlier, the double-edged sword.
Right. The review is balanced. It acknowledges potential negatives, especially in elite sports. Things like the pressure, the fear of failure, impacting mental health.
Injuries, of course.
Injuries, yeah. Eating disorders can be a risk, and burnout too. When it's all about maximum performance, it can take a toll.
Understood. It also makes a distinction between different kinds of activity, doesn't it?
It does. It separates spontaneous physical activity.
Like just moving around in your day.
Exactly. Walking, taking the stairs, active jobs, leisure activities, and then organized activity.
Which includes?
Planned exercise, like going to the gym or for a run, aimed mostly at improving health, and then physical training, which is more focused on hitting peak performance, like for a competition.
Got it. Spontaneous exercise training. And what's the trend they're seeing?
Well, the interesting and maybe slightly worrying trend is that organized exercise and training are going up.
Okay, that sounds good.
But spontaneous activity in daily life seems to be going down.
So even if we hit the gym, we might be sitting more the rest of the time.
Potentially, yes. And that imbalance could lead to an energy surplus, contributing to weight gain despite the planned workouts.
That's a really crucial point. It's the whole day that matters. What about mental health benefits? That seems like a big focus.
Huge focus. The evidence is really strong. Physical activity helps prevent and alleviate mental health issues.
Like depression and anxiety.
Yes, depressive symptoms, anxiety, stress. It makes a significant difference. And the good news is the dose-response relationship.
You mean?
Meaning, even a little bit of activity is way better than nothing. You don't have to run a marathon tomorrow. Just getting moving helps.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
So basically, activity is fundamental for mind and body.
Absolutely. It impacts nearly every system.
Does the review give specific recommendations? Like how much activity we should aim for?
It does, broken down by age group. For kids and teens, 6 to 17, it's at least 60 minutes a day. Mostly moderate to vigorous aerobic stuff.
And muscle work.
Yep, muscle and bone strengthening activities at least 3 times a week.
Okay. What about adults?
For adults 18 to 64, the guideline is at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week. Or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity, ideally spread out. Plus muscle strengthening at least 2 days a week.
And older adults? 65 plus.
Similar guidelines to adults, but with a special emphasis on balance exercises if they're at risk of falls. And adapting activities to their abilities, of course.
So the learner, those are some general targets to think about depending on where you are in life.
They're useful benchmarks. And it's fascinating how deep this need for activity runs. The review mentions our evolutionary past.
Oh, yeah. What does it say?
It compares us to humans from like 40,000 years ago. The estimate for an average man back then was maybe around 19 kilometers of walking daily.
19 kilometers. Wow.
Plus all the other physical demands of just surviving. Puts our desk jobs in perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. And even with more people doing planned exercise now, the review says our calorie intake is rising even faster.
That seems to be the case, yeah. Leading to that energy imbalance and related health problems. It's complex.
So while active people are generally healthier, there's that potential bias. People who are already sick might not participate.
Exactly. That's a factor to consider. But the dose-response relationship seen in studies is compelling, like that Finnish twin study.
Right, you mentioned that. What did it show?
It showed a really clear link. More physical activity meant a lower risk of dying, even after they accounted for other things like smoking or drinking habit.
Wow, even controlling for those factors. That's powerful.
Very powerful. It really highlights the independent benefit of activity.
And the review details loads of specific benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Physical and mental.
Oh, yeah. Reduced musculoskeletal issues, less disability from chronic diseases, better mental health, less anxiety, insomnia, depression, stress. Table 2 in the paper sums it up nicely, system by system. Metabolic, cardiovascular, skeletal, nervous.
It's like a positive domino effect through the whole body.
Pretty much. And it's not just about the immediate feeling after exercise, though that's great too. There are long-lasting effects.
Like what?
Well, some changes, like certain enzyme activity in muscles, might fade relatively quickly if you stop. But other things, like changes in muscle fibers, blood vessels, those can stick around much longer.
Which emphasizes the need for consistency.
Exactly. Progression and continuity are key for those sustained benefits.
Okay, let's talk prevention. The review goes into how activity helps prevent diseases, which I know is a big interest for many.
Right. Table 3 is the place to look for that overview. Regular activity is linked to lower risk of, dying from any cause, basically.
That's a good start.
Definitely. Also, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, several cancers.
Which cancers?
The review mentions bladder, breast, colon, endometrium, esophagus, kidney, lung, and stomach cancers.
Quite a list. What else?
It's crucial for managing weight, both losing it and keeping it off. Maintaining bone health, muscle mass, functional strength, and then the mental side again. Less depression, better sleep, less distress, lower risk of dementia and cognitive decline.
That's an incredible range of protection. Does it work the same for everyone? Men, women, different ages, ethnicities?
For the most part, yes. The benefits seem broadly applicable. The review does note some nuances where data exists.
Like?
For instance, physical activity seems particularly good at reducing hip fracture risk in older women. There's maybe slightly weaker evidence for benefits against breast cancer in Hispanic and Black women, or gastric cancer in women generally.
Okay.
And maybe less strong evidence for kidney cancer protection in Asian populations, while the lung cancer protection seems stronger in women. But honestly, for many conditions, the evidence for major differences just isn't there. The overall message is activity benefits pretty much everyone.
Good to know. And it breaks down aerobic versus muscle strengthening too?
It does. Aerobic activity, think cardio, is great for weight management, metabolic syndrome, blood lipids, and even reducing side effects from cancer treatments.
And the strength training. Lifting weights, resistance bands,
Crucial for fighting muscle loss as we age, reducing falls and osteoporosis risk in the elderly, but also helps with obesity, cognition, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic syndrome, cancer side effects again, joint issues, bone density.
So ideally, you want a mix of both.
Absolutely. A well-rounded routine incorporating both aerobic and muscle strengthening activities seems to give the broadest benefits.
Makes sense. And the mental health connection, it dives into the how, the biology behind it.
Yeah, it touches on potential mechanisms, things like increased blood flow to the brain, maybe even increased brain volume in some areas.
Like the hippocampus, for memory.
Exactly. A larger hippocampus is often linked to better memory. Also, exercise has anti-inflammatory effects, which could be important for brain health.
And something about PGC1L.
Ah, yes, PGC1. Think of it as a molecule your muscles release during exercise. It seems to play a role in making the brain more resilient to stress-induced depression, partly by influencing how the brain handles a substance called kynurenine.
Wow, that's getting specific.
It is. Plus, exercise releases endorphins, growth factors, other signaling molecules, all contributing to that feeling of well-being.
It's amazing how physical movement impacts brain chemistry.
Yeah.
Okay, so the review then looks beyond just the physical act of exercising.
Right. It considers sport more broadly. Its role isn't just activity, but also improving motor skills and, importantly, psychosocial development.
Community building.
Definitely. Sports provide opportunities to build communities, expand social circles, learn shared norms. For lots of people, even those with mental illness, sport offers a sense of meaning, identity, belonging.
That feeling of belonging is huge. What about transferable skills?
Yes, things like goal setting, leadership, teamwork. These are often developed in sports. The potential is there to apply them elsewhere in life. But the review notes, we don't fully understand the best ways to make sure that transfer happens effectively. How do you take the lessons from the field into the office,
That's a good question. The review also mentioned a shift in Sweden, away from spontaneous sports.
Yeah, Figure 3 shows that. Less informal, pickup games maybe, and more organized club sports over recent decades. It changes the context of how people get active and socialize around it.
But sport is still a motivator, especially for older people.
Very much so. Figure 4 shows overall participation drops with age, but sport remains a key way for many older adults to stay active.
And starting young seems really important for lifelong activity.
Critically important. Figure 5 shows a clear link. Being active in sports at age 15 is strongly associated with being more physically active at age 53. Establishing that foundation early really matters.
So youth sports are key for building those lifelong habits.
Exactly. And consistency is vital for reducing illness risk later in life. The review stresses making youth sports inclusive, getting everyone involved.
And avoiding early specialization. Focusing too much on one sport too soon.
Yes, strong warning against that. It can harm both health and long-term athletic potential. Variety is much better for young athletes.
Table 5 apparently lists pros and cons for youth sports.
Yeah, it's a good summary. Positives include better self-esteem, maybe better academic performance, teamwork skills, physical literacy, healthier body composition.
And the negatives.
Potential for emotional fatigue, stress, injuries, eating disorders, sometimes even feeling isolated from non-sport peers or family. It's a balance.
A real balance.
Yeah, and also mention the relative age effect. What's that?
Ah, that's interesting. It's basically that kids born earlier in a selection year, say January versus December, for a calendar year cutoff often have an advantage because they're physically a bit more mature.
Just because they're older.
Yep. Figure 6 illustrates it. And this can mean they get selected more often, get better coaching, while later born kids might get discouraged or drop out.
And that can affect their activity levels long term.
Worth being aware of. So the overall message for kids is holistic development, tailoring things, preventing injuries, and encouraging variety.
That's the gist. Healthy, lifelong engagement is the goal.
Okay, now let's look at adults and older adults. What happens if adults stop playing sports?
Well, the review points out their activity levels tend to drop, and their health risks can become similar to people who were never active.
So you can't just bank the benefits from your youth.
Doesn't seem like it. Ongoing engagement is key.
Sticking with exercise can be tough, though. Does it mention factors influencing adherence?
It does. Things like the intensity, duration, and whether there's supervision, these can all be adjusted to help people stick with a program. Personalization matters.
And for healthy aging, it's not just about avoiding disease.
No, it's a broader picture. Absence of disease, yes, but also good physical and mental function, and importantly, social engagement.
In team sports, help with the social part.
They can be particularly good for that, yeah. As activity often declines with age, staying active or even starting later is strongly linked to healthier aging.
Is participation in sports clubs common among adults in Sweden?
Less common than individual exercise, according to the review. But even so, being involved in sports, competitive or not, is linked to healthier behaviors and better quality of life in older adults.
And that relative age effect pops up again, even in masters athletes.
Kind of amazing, isn't it? Even among older competitors, that birth date effect can still be seen sometimes.
Wow. The review also mentioned needing higher intensity exercise as we age.
Yes, to maintain function. While moderate activity is always good, higher intensity work, even competition-oriented training, becomes more important for preserving strength and capacity.
And older adults can do high intensity exercise.
Absolutely, it's often feasible and beneficial. It's a myth that they can't. Competitive sports can be a great way to push themselves and counter that age-related decline.
It even mentioned golf.
Yeah, as an example of an activity that's relatively safe and has good adherence rates among older adults.
And it's good to see competitive sports participation rising among adults in Sweden recently.
Yes, the review notes that trend since 2010 and suggests it could lead to better population health down the line.
Okay, finally, we wanted to touch on that thesis about swimming and subjective well-being. We don't have the detailed findings, but what's the significance?
Well, just the focus itself is interesting. It suggests that specific activities, like swimming, might have unique ways of impacting how good we feel, our subjective well-being.
Beyond just the general benefits of exercise.
Potentially. Maybe it's something about being in the water, the low-impact nature, the rhythm. It adds another layer to think about. Different activities might offer different psychological perks.
So it highlights the diversity of how physical activity can boost our well-being. Okay, let's wrap this up. Key takeaways for you, the learner.
First, that team cohesion thing. It builds psychological safety, boosts motivation big time, and those benefits can definitely spill over into other parts of life.
Second, physical activity, any kind really, is incredibly powerful for physical and mental health across your whole life. Consistency and finding enjoyment seem key.
Third, be mindful of the potential downsides of very intense or specialized sports, especially for kids. Balance and broad development are better long-term.
Fourth, staying active as you age is crucial. Sports, exercise. They help maintain health, well-being, and those important social ties.
And fifth, different activities might hit differently. Consider how something specific, like swimming, could contribute uniquely to your sense of well-being.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to chew on. We've seen this incredibly strong link between moving your body and your long-term health. So what's one small, doable change you could make to just move a bit more consistently, starting now?
And thinking back to that teamwork idea, how could you intentionally try to foster more of that team feeling, that psychological safety and support in your work or community groups to maybe unlock some of those same benefits for well-being and motivation?
Lots to think about there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.